Dubai is known today as the city of the rich and famous for its tall skyscrapers and rich and glitz lifestyle. But many years ago, it was just this humble fishing village on the River Creek. What actually happened? Who are the guys and the architects behind it? And in this video today, I'm going to talk about the parallels of how the Al Maktoum family actually built Dubai to where it is, and how it is actually very parallel to templates we use to find companies that can multi-bag in terms of investment return. Hello everyone and welcome back to my channel. My name is John, former engineer turned full-time investor, currently wealth planning director at Visionary Capital and author of the book, The Malaysian Multibaggers. I'll be having a book launch on the 28th of March, this Saturday, 2 p.m. at MPH Come join in the fun, come celebrate this milestone together with me and meet interesting people. So strategy one actually begins in 1894 when Sheikh Maktoum bin Hasir realized that Dubai, being a small regional port, could not compete with the other ports around the region. And one of the barriers or the friction was actually port tariffs. And a lot of these port tariffs had very, very high tariffs. That's one way to tax incoming and outgoing trade. And Sheikh Maktoum bin Hasir, he actually said, let's do something very radical, very simple solution. Let's abolish all these custom duties and use a free port kind of concept to immediately attract merchants to trade there, right? And because of that, Dubai turned into like a magnet for commerce and filling the creek with cargo boats. You know, this is 1894. I mean, not the same size as shipping giants like Maersk with their tankers. They said no. I mean, this is like merchant ships, regional ships that go around. But it did the job. And from an investment lens, I think I look for companies who have disruptors. They understand that removing friction is one of the best ways to actually scale, because it actually lowers cost for people, or eliminating either subscription fees or streamlining a user experience, making it hassle-free. I mean, if you think about payments, banking, a lot of the new entrants, the disruptors, was precisely this, the hassle-free experience that, what banking clients suffer today is just completely removed from these new entrants, right? Completely digital experience, completely, onboarding for purely digital. You don't have to go to a branch. So that's a perfect example of, the strategy that the Al Maktoum family did. Was just look for friction, look for bad user experience, look for, high barriers to entry, and be a platform that eliminates all this. So strategy number two, and this is something that I see in a lot of multi-baggers actually, is actually taking calculated, high conviction bets on capex, or in this case for Dubai, it was actually infrastructure. So in the late 1950s, Dubai was facing an existential crisis because the creek, where in the previous generation of the Al Maktoum family, they actually abolished all these tariffs, right? So it was lively, but it was a very shallow creek. So therefore, larger ships had to go to rival ports that had deeper, port depth and everything. So prior to 1950s, Dubai did not have any oil revenue. It was really just relying on trade. And what Said Rashid bin Said Al Maktoum actually did was he took a loan. He actually took a loan of £400,000, which is a staggering amount in 1950s, right? He took a loan, and he took that loan to actually dredge the river, the creek, to enable larger vessels to actually come and trade there. And the impact was instantaneous because it made Dubai to be one of the busiest ports. It saved the economy. Yeah. It's always when you're pushed into a corner that you have to be creative, and most people just don't pivot. They just get into analysis paralysis and just die off. But these guys were like, I've got no choice. Let's take a bet, right? And in this case, a gamble. And that gamble really, really paid off. So from an investment lens, the best capital allocators, right? They are not overly conservative. They know that they may not be able to act on 100% of information, maybe 60, 70, 80%, and then 30% is unknown. But they're willing to step outside their comfort zone, make a bet, and a calculated risk, and from there it will thrive. I mean, I've seen this. Okay, if we draw parallels to my book, The Malaysian Multibaggers, the Lim family of Yinsen, right? They had no clue on how to run an FPSO business, because in the past it was oil trucks. They rented tugboats to the Port Authority of Vietnam, and when they were offered this opportunity, they said, I'm going to raise capital because it's an opportunity that not many people will get. They raised capital. They started, with 2 FPSs in Vietnam, right? And they were honest enough to say that they learned so much. They made mistakes, but they learned, and from there they went from strength to strength, just leveraging on their balance sheet to build FPSOs around the world, and from there there's a payout, from the leasing of the FPSO. So it's a long game, right? The other example in Malaysia I would give is Megafirst, the company that actually built the hydropower dam in Laos, supplying electricity to Cambodia. Or maybe if we look at today, you look at who are the guys that are spending 100 billion, 200 billion to build data centers, hyperscalers, to meet the demand of AI today. It's the guys like Facebook, the guy or Meta, or the guys like Amazon. Amazon just recently announced a 200 billion capex plan, right? And if you convert that, let's just say to Malaysian ringgit, 200 billion multiply, let's say about 4 is 800 billion. You're talking about 8 Maybanks. Maybank is about 100 billion market cap, right? 8 Maybank in capex in for the next few years, right? Just to have that cutting edge in terms of AI. So you don't become a good capital allocator by being overly conservative. You become a good capital allocator by knowing the landscape of the industry so well, making decisions on as much data as you can, but knowing there is an unknown, and knowing to say, what's my reward on the upside? What's my reward on the downside? Because if you don't spend that kind of money, how will you survive the onslaught of competition from China, competition from anywhere else? I think that's what we look for, taking that calculated risk, taking that conviction, capital allocation bets on mostly infrastructure that will make them stand out in a very crowded world of equity investment. Strategy number 3, reinvest your windfalls, because good times never last, and never rely on a single cash cow. Now, when Dubai finally discovered oil in 1966, revenue started gushing into the government treasury, and in 1969, other nations, especially, they have this term called the oil curse, right? Other nations, especially in Latin America, they rested on this sudden wealth. Wow, start enjoying ourselves, right? Said Rashid understood a fundamental truth, because oil is a finite resource, but trade is actually eternal. And he treated this windfall as, seed capital. And he rapidly, built even more ports, even more harbors, because he knew that was what made, the pivots earlier in the 1950s, right? And he built the 39-story, World Trade Center, equivalent of the World Trade Center in New York, to encourage trade, right? He invested in the Jebel Ali port, which is the largest man-made harbor in the world, right? And because of this relentless reinvestment, right, today, oil only contributes less than 1% of Dubai's GDP. If you compare that to Malaysia, no. I mean, Malaysia had the benefit of oil since the early 1900s when the Royal Dutch Shell Company actually drilled in Miri, right? So we already knew we had that kind of resource. But have we diversified much? Don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that we have tried, but we've not gone to a point where it's 1% of our GDP contribution, right? So from an investment lens, a major red flag is that when a company has a windfall and they just continue milking. Like one good example would be glove companies. Like if you think about the COVID years, they had record profit, record revenue, right? And it's not easy to diversify. I get it, right? But instead of paying everything out in dividends and enriching the shareholders, you would know that the good times will never last, right? And while the product is not obsolete, it's still a consumable product for gloves. But the threat from China, the competition from anywhere else, because it's so lucrative, they realize the importance of it now. That's where when you stand still and you just rely on that single cash cow, that's where you retreat. So visionary builders, they don't take that windfall as just static. They realize that unless they keep on investing, growing, experimenting, you will eventually be outcompeted by someone else, by upstart, a new change in product. And only by those guys that continuously experiment and pivot, that's where you fund your future innovations with the existing cash cow. That's what we look for in great capital allocators. So strategy number 3, reinvest your windfalls, don't rely on single cash cow. Strategy number 4, rewrite the playbook on creating ecosystem. So in the 1980s, oil revenue was flattening, and Syed Rashid Al Maktoum, he spearheaded this bold concept. I alluded to it earlier. It was actually this Jebel Ali free zone, which he created a city within city where foreign companies could own 100% ownership, paying no taxes, and move goods freely around. Now, if you go to countries like Indonesia, foreigners are not allowed to have majority stake in companies in Indonesia. There's still barriers to full equity ownership. In Malaysia, roughly the same, just percentage is different, right? And back then, it was unheard of. 1980s, it was unheard of in the Middle East, and it completely rewrote the playbook and the rule book about regional businesses, because by allowing that to happen, you attract a lot of foreign firms to come in. And this is the turning point where oil became less important for Dubai's growth, and it became a hub for entrepreneurial energy. So from an investment lens, we always seek out actively platform companies or ecosystem companies, or some pick and shovel company that's so important to the ecosystem that people actually rely on. Like, for example, when WhatsApp was actually created, right, it was a communication tool to enable free flow of communication between countries or between users that didn't want to pay hefty international dialing code or hefty SMS messages. It democratized the way people communicate, and now coupled with video calls, couple of voice calls, international calls, that was free, right? This is a perfect example of a platform and an ecosystem. And while they're not really monetized, I'm pretty sure that there will be more monetization soon. We already see it in WhatsApp API and all that kind of thing. It actually make a company or a business very resilient, because you don't rely on a superstar product. You become a platform. You become an enabler for commerce or trade. And that's where when new standards, new rules are written, this is where the exponential scale and growth will come. I mean, talk about e-commerce back in the day when Amazon, Alibaba, and even now we look at C Limited or Shopee, right? If you look at C Limited, they were being funded by their gaming cash flows. The e-commerce was barely making a profit, back in the early days, right? But the moment they achieved scale, and they had a crisis in 2022 where the profits actually went into losses. But the moment they achieved scale, it's all about making sure that ecosystem is thriving. And I think this is where that strategy of creating ecosystems is very, very important, that I can draw from the Al Maktoum family to the investment lens strategy number 4. So strategy number 5, play the long game through a crisis. So prior to Dubai being a free port, a free trading zone, it actually grew its economy on another thing, which was pearls. And in the area around Dubai, there were a lot of pearl hunters that actually did the traditional route of unearthing pearls and selling them on the market, and it was very well received around the world. But in 1920s, the Japanese actually invented the cultivation of pearls, and because of that invention, the whole Dubai pearl trading industry actually collapsed almost overnight, and it nearly left the city into ruins. So they pivoted, right? In 2008, remember Dubai built this the free trade zone, the World Trade Center, and a lot of this was actually funded on debt. So in 2008, during the global financial crisis, the subprime crisis, this debt fuel expansion came to a grinding halt, But luckily, Dubai had a bailout from Abu Dhabi, right? In a way, the cousin, right? A cousin family saved the city. But what I'm trying to share, the parallels is you have to play the long game. You have to be patient enough to be able to stomach crises like this. And these macroeconomic shocks is a given. It's just when. It's not a why or what. It's a when. Like the Russian-Ukraine war, the Trump tweet, and tariff shocks in April 2025, and now with the Israel, US, and Iran war, these are a given even going forward. Let's just say we achieve peace, something somewhere will have some kind of macroeconomic shock, and what we like to see from investors' lens to the owners of public listed companies is that they have a lens to say that I don't know when the black swan event will happen, but I know that the way I structure my business, the way I put in capex, the way I will pivot, or how to tighten my belt when something like this happens, is where the survival of the fittest will then allow them to thrive when the crisis ends. And I think when you play a long game, you'll be able to scale and grow when everyone else has actually died off in a crisis. That is exactly where multi-baggers stocks, right? They did not go up in a straight line. They had to face existential crisis at many points. I mean, if you look at where Nvidia is today, $4 trillion company, they had existential crisis many parts of their journey, but every time they pulled through, and they were resilient because they knew how to pivot, right, from a gaming card company to an AI chip company, and they're already working on the next thing, because their founders and owners know that they've survived until today because of this attitude and outlook. So there you go, the 5 strategies of what I could learn from the Maktoum family and put on an investment lens to it. Let me know in the comments which strategy resonated with you. Let me know in the comments also that, is there a strategy that you felt you have seen in other companies that play out very well? And last but not least, what are the things that I should include as a template to look for multi-bagger stocks and owner operators? I'll see you in the next video.